Now, time has come for our first VIP panel discussion. It will focus on digital governments and the competition between authoritarian and democratic practices in this area. With all the potential that technology delivers for us, will a global society fall under heavy surveillance or the big tech brother? Or will digital solutions let states support and protect their citizens? Or will perhaps the government use information and communication technologies to make repression and manipulation easier? In other words, will technology help to create a world we want to live in, or one we know, from not-that-futuristic books and movies about dystopian societies like Orwell's 1984? We have the honor to present our speakers who will discuss that. Margrethe Vestager, Executive Vice President of the European Commission, and Her Excellence Kersti Kaljulaid, President of the Republic of Estonia, under the baton of Joanna Świątkowska, Assistant Professor at the AGH University of Science and Technology, Initiator and Cybersec Program Director in 2014-2019.
Gentlemen, and welcome to the session on the future of digital governance. My name is Joanna Świątkowska, and I will be your host for this session. I would like to start by saying that top-notch experts, global leaders, and cutting-edge topics have always been the hallmark of Cybersec. And this year is no different. When you look at the panels, they are all packed full of cybersecurity superstars. But I guess that it won't be an exaggeration if I will say that this particular session, the one that I have such a huge privilege to chair, is the crème de la crème of this year's conference. And there are two reasons for that, really. One of them is quite obvious. And of course, that's the composition of our panel. I mean, that's our unique opportunity to hear from two leaders who are shaping global digital agenda on a daily basis. And of course, the second reason is related with the topic itself. Today we will discuss the key issues related to cybersecurity and our digital future. But before I will say a few words about the topic that we will discuss, I would like to do the most important element of our today's meeting. I would like to wholeheartedly introduce our honorable guests. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my huge honor to welcome on our virtual stage Madam Kersti Kaljulaid, President of the Republic of Estonia, and Madam Margrethe Vestager, Executive Vice President, European Commission. Once again, dear ladies, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much.
Hello.
So, I would like to open this session with a quote that I believe corresponds very well to the issues that we will discuss today. So the article is entitled "The Internet Freedom League: How to Push Back Against the Authoritarian Assault of the Web." It was published in the pages of Foreign Affairs, and actually was written by Richard Clark and Rob Kanaki, who, by the way, agreed to accept our invitation and will enrich our conference later on this day. So the article reads, "The early days of the internet inspired a lofty dream. Authoritarian states, faced with the prospect of either connecting to a new system of global communication or being left out of it, would choose to connect. According to this line of utopian thinking, once those countries connected, the flow of new information and ideas from the outside world would pull them towards economic openness and political liberalization. In reality, something quite different has happened. Instead of spreading democratic values and liberal ideas, the internet has become the backbone of authoritarian surveillance states all over the world." End of the quote. And why I brought up this particular article is that, in my opinion, it illustrates well the problem that I would like to discuss today. I mean, this utopian vision of cyberspace as an idyllic domain which would trigger only positive aspects like collaboration, innovation, spread of good ideas, I believe that it's mistaken. Why is that? Because cyberspace is just neutral. I mean, it can bring both what's the best in humanity, but also it can reveal its darkest. And omnipresent espionage, cyber attacks on the health sector, so visible also during the pandemic, I believe that proves that point. So the goal of our session would be to discuss what should be done by democratic states to make sure that our democratic values will govern cyberspace, and therefore how to counter adversarial vision of the future of the internet. And with that, I would like to move to the first question, and I would like to direct that question to both of our honorable guests, because in times where authoritarian states are exercising cyber practices which are so far away from the democratic rules, we must ask ourselves this honest question. Is it the end of the cyberspace as we know it? Is it the end of open and inclusive cyberspace? The article that I quoted called for establishment of the Internet Freedom League. And that would mean that only entities that oblige to democratic rules are able to join, right? To be a part of the international cyber community. But leaving aside theoretical articles, when we look at concrete political decisions, like for instance, the US proposal to establish the Clean Network, or Chinese project on the initiative on global data security. I mean, to me, these are a signs that we are moving forward fragmented cyberspace. So the question is it the end of the internet as we know it? And quite maybe a slightly provocative question, maybe that's something that should be done. Maybe if we want to remain and uphold our values, maybe that's something that we need to follow. So if I may please ask Madam President Kaljulaid to start with your take on that.
Hello, and I'm very happy we are able to discuss these questions here. And I would really be worried if we said that we need to separate internet into the internet for democratic nations and internet for those who are behind the Iron Curtain. I grew up behind the Iron Curtain, and I know that it was quite easy to ignore what was going on the other side. It happened for 50 years. So I'm adamant we should not separate internet into two parts, one for democratic nations and the other for the others. Then that would be exactly what the totalitarian regimes are dreaming of, and we would be doing it ourselves. I find this idea not at all good. Let's face it, internet is not the reason why authoritarian regimes are oppressing their people. It's just one tool. So the answer is indeed the same as in conventional world. We need to insist on the democratic rights of all people globally. We need to make sure that we understand the risks, and we need to regulate them. How? First of all, we have our international law. International law also in human rights. These should all apply in internet. Basically, all international law created for analog world should apply in internet. There is ample academic work that this is how it should be. So in fact, instead of fighting specifically totalitarian regimes in internet, we should understand what we could do to help citizens who live under these conditions where they are not free to express their views and deal with that. There is no difference between analog space and digital space in this. Hence, we should not take different stance compared to the analog space.
Thank you so much, Madam President, for those extremely important remarks. If I may ask Madam Executive Vice President to also share your point of view on this issue.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to this very important subject and in this very excellent company. I would like to echo the words of the President. I think that is the most important, the baseline, that the internet should be open for everyone on this planet, and human rights should also be our dreams and what we fight for in the digital world as well as we do it in the analog world. That will take a lot of effort on our side. Also in something that may seem sort of very trivial in the standard setting. So that not by some multilateral accident, all of a sudden the internet protocol is turned upside down. But also in the rules that we set as democracies on digital service providers, how we work together on cybersecurity, all of that needs all of us to come together. Because I think, as it was just said, the internet is a tool. You will see the best in humans, you will see the worst in humans. The important thing is that we have the willingness to work to fulfill a dream of also a human internet, where human rights is the fundamentals when it comes to how we behave with one another.
Thank you so much. And actually, I would like to follow up on this answer, but before I will do that, I would like to also encourage our audience to propose your own questions on the Q&A list. I mean, we will go back to that at the end of this session. So, Madam Executive Vice President, I would like to actually follow up on what you said, because I completely agree that despite what many people say, I mean, technology is not being neutral in a way that values like privacy or security can be just embedded into the technology by design and by default. And actually, the European Union is doing a lot to create policies and standards and also some regulations to enforce certain actors to do exactly that, create technology that would be in line with those principles. But again, let me be a little bit more bold with my question, and I would like to ask you, do you believe it's enough? Because being this regulatory pioneer or a leader is one thing, but don't we need something more, like for instance, a solid tech sector, European tech sector that would promote by its products and services solutions, digital infrastructure that would help to spread those democratic values in a way?
Well, yes and no, because the important thing, of course, is to be willing to set standards, sort of to give also digital citizens rights. You can say that the GDPR, it's a push for digital citizens' right, that you own your data, that you can have your data, that you have the right to be forgotten. So I think it is very important to have that willingness to regulate. I think whenever you look at the history of democracies, it has been this legitimacy of the democracy to frame what you can do and what you cannot do in our world, that be digital or analog. I agree very much in what you say that we also need a tech sector, because it's very difficult to regulate something that you don't know in depth. And this is, of course, why it is very important that Europe is there now when we start sort of the second chapter of digitization, where sort of the business to business technology will be developed in full scale, because we get to a completely different sort of sets and level of Internet of Things, of facial recognition, of quantum computing, everything that comes now where the business to business interest is at stake. And here, obviously, it's very important that European companies have a very strong presence here. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to maintain sort of this pioneering work to regulate what we're dealing with.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. I hope that we will elaborate more broadly on the need of development of cyber capabilities also in terms of the technological sector later on. But now I would like to come back to Madam President, because we are speaking about digital champions, so we must come back to Estonia, which actually serves as a role model on how to use diplomacy to increase cybersecurity, promote value-based cyberspace. Maybe just to give a word of context, just recently amid the COVID crisis, Estonia began its first ever presidency of the UN Security Council. And just at the beginning of your term, you organized a virtual debate exactly on cybersecurity, cyber stability, how to build cyber capabilities. And I believe that by doing that, you managed to put cybersecurity at the heart of the UN processes. But my question is, to what extent diplomatic activities can help democratic states to counter these adversarial aspects and actions that are being visible at the international stage? To what extent cyber diplomacy can help to sustain our vision of secure cyberspace?
First of all, if I may, I would also like to comment on the last question, which dealt with what should we in Europe do in order to create for ourselves a safe internet space. I would like to point out that Europe is the only region where we have international cooperation on digital ID. And we hope that eIDAS 2.0 will actually propose that each and every European citizen will have at least one eIDAS-compatible digital ID. And this is, by the way, the most important step Europe is taking to guarantee internet security and safety to its citizens, because without a passport on street space, we do not believe we can be safe and secure, because everything relies in, well, preventing crime, preventing atrocities, on knowing who might be committing them, knowing people. eIDAS is a system which will give Europeans this possibility to act and transact with those whom they know. So Europe, I find, has a great advantage over any other developed region in having an internationally operating digital ID mechanism already in place. Then, in addition, the question was about European digital companies. I think there is a grain of truth in the statement what was just made in this panel, which says that if you don't know what you regulate, you cannot regulate properly. And this is true. European governments who have at least some level of digital service provision available for their citizens, when actually implementing GDPR, etc., were regulating de facto themselves. Therefore, they were not regulating something really far away, but themselves. So indeed, digital services which government provides, normally built by private sector, European companies, local companies, do give a certain level of understanding how to regulate the digital space. This is indeed very important. Now to our United Nations Security Council role. Actually, the first step we took was something which we promised during our campaign, was if an opportunity arises, and normally it does arise because we already have globally conflicts ongoing where digital is an element, we will bring attacks against sovereign states to the Security Council. There was one against Georgia. We brought it together with the support of UK and US and others to the Security Council, and it was attributed. So we already started to create common law. These discussions should be held in United Nations Security Council. Second, indeed, we organized a discussion forum on cybersecurity, because there are many working groups in UN which are, well, consistently making academic progress, but we are not coming to the conclusion which seems self-evident by now, based on all academic research globally, including the UN-owned working groups. And this is, there is no need to create special legal space. The legal space we have already does apply simply in the cyberspace.
Thank you so much. And speaking about the European solutions and not only regulations, but as you, Madam, mentioned also, proposal related with our digital ID, I mean, that all proves that indeed our efforts to create the cybersecurity landscape within the European Union can also influence the globe. I mean, the GDPR is just the perfect illustration on how European solutions can influence some other regions. But right now, I think because you both mentioned so heavily the role of the industry and the European solutions in this regards, I would like to come back to this particular issue. And if I may, the question will come to both of our distinguished speakers, because the role of technology providers is absolutely essential, and it has been increasing over the years. So maybe let's talk for a second about some basics, but I guess that they are extremely important. So what is the role of the private sector, whether European or from the outside of the European Union, in sustaining cybersecurity standards? And so what is their role? And above all, how about accountability? What if the solutions, products, services provided by the private sector are not meeting security standards? How should we and how should states respond to this scenario? So if I may please once again ask Madam President to start with your answer.
Do not give them the necessary tools, because to guarantee safety, you need to start from legal space. Legal space is by definition created by governments, not by private sector. It's totally unfair to go and complain that private sector is not guaranteeing the safety of people in cyberspace if the governments have not created the necessary legal space. Let's take again then the example I know best, which is the Estonian e-government system. It is indeed an environment where all state business with citizens is run online, but it is not kind of wild west of internet. Quite to the contrary, it's clearly but simply regulated space. Like, for example, presenting yourself online as somebody else, using somebody else's identity, is as bad as using a falsified document in analog world. Nosing around the state system simply because you have access by your job title, but you do not have actually the reason to check anybody's data, this is a crime. You are punished because this is a crime. The data which the government handles still belongs to citizens. So citizens have an absolute control over that data, which means if somebody is looking at that data, there will be a report going back to a citizen, which, by the way, is already a higher level of security than you could guarantee on paper, because nobody could check that nobody checked their paper. Everybody can check that somebody checked their file. See, it all starts with regulation. And now going to internet companies and saying that you cannot guarantee the safety, hence you are the guilty party. I mean, they have all the right to come back and ask, what are the tools? And again, we are back to digital identity. Nicknames are never safe. Digital identity means you know with whom you are acting and transacting. You could still have internet for fun, where you do not identify. But at least for purchases, providing information, providing also internet courses, for example, be it in universities or elsewhere, people who participate and people who give these, they should be checking into the system by their IDs. And who can give an ID? Can Google give you a passport? No. So Google cannot give you digital ID neither. It's only governments.
Thank you so much. And actually, with this last sentence, I cannot wait for the comment coming from Madam Executive Vice President. Please.
It is extremely encouraging what is said here. And also because this is such a thing, everyone has a passport. And that gives you, in Europe, a European identity and a national identity. And we can do the same thing digitally, so that you do not have to use your whatever login that will make sure that data will travel a lot. A digital ID will only give away the data needed to identify you as this is the person that you're dealing with. And that, I think, is very important. But the thing is that also for states to create this legal space for private business to live up to obligations is important. And I think the process with 5G is a very good example, because here, under the leadership of my previous colleague, Julian King, member states and commission made an assessment of the risks in every part of the value chain of 5G. And then we developed together a toolbox to make sure that all these risks could be mitigated. And now we're in that process where member states work both to make a legal framework, but also to work with hardware providers, software providers, telcos, in order to make sure that 5G deployment is done in a safe way. And I think that is a good example of the interaction between Commission, member states and private sector, because obviously we need the private sector on board because we need the service providers, we need the innovation, we need all of that to come. And last but not least, it is very important that governments also insist on enabling citizens to have digital skills at a certain level. Everyone should have basic skills to be able to navigate, to know what it is that they're dealing with, so that they not so easily become victims of technology, because the very basic here is that technology should serve us as humans, as societies. And these things that we're talking about right now is the building blocks of creating technology that we can trust. Because only if we fundamentally trust that technology will serve us well, will we be able to unleash the full potential of technology in our society, of better health, better education, fighting climate change, enabling convenient transportation. All of that potential can only be unleashed if we trust technology. And here, things like the 5G toolbox, digital identity, they are essential building blocks.
Without any doubt, I can only echo what has been said, especially in context of the 5G toolbox. I can clearly see, being a close observer here in Poland, how much European initiatives influence the whole ecosystem. Right now, we are also waiting for the revision of NIS directive, having some high hopes on how it will influence the cybersecurity scene in a way. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to now maybe take a look at our questions coming from the audience, because I can see that we have some of them. The first one, the first question goes to Madam Executive Vice President Vestager. What is the EU's joint cyber unit expected by the end of the year mean to do? What will its precise role and operational capabilities be?
Well, that's an excellent question, also because we're in the process of answering it ourselves. Because when it is things that connects with security, things are always sensitive. But the bottom line here is that no one is capable of being cyber secure on their own. So we think that we can build up a joint cybersecurity unit by starting with coordinating efforts, but also with having real capabilities that can be called upon if one is being threatened by large-scale attacks and you need more capabilities to come and assist you. So it's both in the preventing part, in coordinating how prevention takes place, but also, of course, that we can help each other out if we have large-scale attacks. And no one should be naive here. I think it was really disheartening during the COVID lockdown to see the attacks also on our hospitals. Even in such a situation, some things that they can attack hospitals. So I think indeed it's needed, but our ideas, they are shaping right now. So of course, we'll also be relying on your ideas. We will do public consultation about what will be the best level, how to get this started.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm more than sure that both the Cybersec community, but also the Kościuszko Institute will contribute with their recommendations how to create and build this particular capability. The next question comes from Logan Carmichael. What international organizations or forums do you see as the most effective for regulating cyberspace? How can these platforms ensure that the internet is not divided between democratic and not democratic states? So I guess that this question must come to both of our guests. So if we can start with Madam President to share your take on that.
Well, I do not see that any international organization which has anything doing in regulating specifically economic space or political space can shy away from taking on digital responsibilities. As I said, there is no difference between analog and digital. Everything which starts in analog nowadays has some digital elements and vice versa. So absolutely everybody, I mean, starting from European Union, as we have been seeing, European Union has already taken many initiatives to make sure that we can have a digital single market where each and everyone is safe to operate. UN, of course, UN's role was explained as well. But I also see huge role, for example, for OECD, because OECD is a standard setter of democratic, relatively well-off economies, where we discuss all aspects, be they diplomatic, political, be they also economic. For example, we seem to be missing today that our industrial area is totally gone. We are now in the new digital area. But if we look at our tax systems or the way how we provide social services in social market economies to our people, it's totally stuck in industrial age. People go to work in one enterprise. Taxes come from that enterprise to the state as a big river, and then we offer services to people according to where they live. But our people work independently more and more, serve at the same time many companies in many jurisdictions simultaneously, and they also live everywhere. And they live everywhere because their job is in their pocket. So we need to globalize the whole view, start making a person, independent person, more an entity in economy, and understand their global needs for social services, security, education, etc. All this we need to rethink. And finally, also I see the role for World Trade Organization, because the services market is going global now as a trade market went. You can work as a bookkeeper in Estonia from Australia, for example. How do we now arrange what are the taxes paid, who is the unit paying taxes, and where the services will be provided, so that we will not, for example, be exploiting the macroeconomic situation, let's say, somewhere in African countries, if their people choose to offer services in rich economies. All these things we need to deal with in coming decade.
Thank you so much. I guess that I cannot agree more. I mean, we speak about cybersecurity these days in the context of those high-level strategic decisions, and that's extremely important to not disattach the discussion from the economic reality as well. But coming back to the question, because it was also addressed to Madam Vice President, so if I may ask you to share with us your reflections on it.
Well, I think that the main point has been said, that no one can shy away from taking responsibility when it comes to digital, because our entire world digitalizes. And that means that it's important for everyone to be aware. For instance, what happens in ITU, International Telecommunications Union, because here a lot of standard setting discussions take place. And we've just had proposals that would basically turn the internet upside down with a new protocol. And I think it's very important to be very much aware what also happens in organizations and institutions that we may not think about every day. A second example would be International Postal Union, because as e-commerce becomes more and more widespread, it's also important what are the conditions actually to ship things from one part of the world to the other, because that becomes very important when it comes to competitiveness. So this point that everyone should be aware, because digitization is the name of what we are doing right now, then it is important to be aware also what happens in organizations that we might not be aware of. And here I think it's very important what is done in the UN at the global level, and the efforts now done by Estonia, but also by the OECD, because as it was just said, it is not sustainable that we have one tax system for analog companies and then basically have a non-tax system for digital companies, because they will still compete of skilled labor, of capital, of customer awareness. So of course we have to bring order in our global house when it comes to fairness in taxation.
Thank you so much. And I can see that we have the very last question, because we are approaching to the end of this session. Again, for both our speakers, coming from Mr. Daniel Perez Fernandez. So what are your thoughts on the Gaia X initiative? Does it contribute to the development of the sovereign EU digital space? Madam Executive Vice President, we need to start with your opinion on that.
Well, I think that is very, very important, because we need competition to the cloud solutions that we see today. We also need competition on some of the fundamentals of how cloud service is provided, so that cloud services will be provided with a starting point of privacy, of protecting your data, of having data available when you need it. And I see the Gaia X initiative, the idea coming from Germany, traveling to France, now spreading more and more and more. I think it's very important that we have also these European debates about what is it that we want offered in order for our businesses to feel that they have real choices when it comes to how and where and under what conditions to store their data. So I'm very enthusiastic about this project and look forward, of course, also from the Commission side to work with it.
Again, I think that's exactly to the point. I mean, I believe that all those initiatives being proposed by the European are by no means something against already existing companies and markets, rather just, as you, Madam, said, just to make sure that we do have a choice, and also we are able to pick up something from our own industry. But as the question was directed to both of our guests, now please, Madam President, what do you believe about this particular issue?
Well, you cannot have a single digital market unless you have a certain way of handling data. And many European nations have for far too long been declaring that for some services to offer, data needs to be handled within a national space. And if the next step, therefore, is to handle it together in European global space according to the same rules, and this is trust-building issue, I think it is a good next step. But I also see the need to be able to expand the use of data in a safe manner outside that space, and to make sure that we are globally able to work with data without actually risking the safety. So I see this as a necessary next step to exit this kind of national cloud problem, which we have been seeing for quite a long time already, which has actually prevented the digital service market to go truly free in Europe. But I do not see this as a last step. We definitely need also to start working on how safely this data acquired from this cloud and used from this cloud can be also used for service provision outside this cloud. But nevertheless, it is an important next step. I see this as a very important and actually urgent issue. We should have done it yesterday.
But Madam President, I cannot help myself not to ask about your assessment, because I know that many people, even though they see the potential of Gaia X and the need that, yes, we need to create our own cloud capabilities, do you think it's feasible to build it within the European Union? Because if we're looking about the composition of the actors who are contributing to this project, well, they are quite limited. So, like, how to unlock this potential?
As I said, it is a trust-building measure rather than a final solution. And as such, I think we should first do this, and then we will see also the limitations to this approach and go therefore wider based on really global standards on cloud and gathering data in the clouds. I think this is an intermediate step. There is sufficient support by member states for this step. Let's take this step now.
Thank you so much. And with this positive note, I think we are approaching to the end of the session. I first of all, thank you wholeheartedly on behalf of the whole Cybersec team for accepting our invitation. I believe that it was just excellent session, and I think that we talked about many critical aspects of our digital future. I trust that the team of Cybersec will gather all the recommendations that were mentioned during the session and prepare a solid dose of good recommendations for the future that will be disseminated. So one more time, Madam President, Madam Executive Vice President, thank you so much for being with us. I trust that next time we will see each other physically in Poland. Nevertheless, thank you so much for being with us on this virtual stage. The pleasure was mine.
Well, it was great to be here.